said, I've been,
Hello.
the old axe was laying down there on the ground. He said, I've been cutting these mesquite since daylight. And he said, I'm already give 'em out. He said, why? I used to go all day long. And he said, it ain't 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm already give 'em. Now, how old is Homer? 90 or 91?
I really thought he was older than that. I was thinking he was about the same age as my brother that died, but I think, I guess I'm thinking about Bill Cade, maybe.
Yeah, about 6 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock, 4 hours, and he's already giving out cutting mesquite. And that's the hardest job you can do.
Almost got an old man.
You want a cup of coffee?
And this is November 6th, 1986. This is Joe Todd, an interview with Mr. Jack Berry
Yes.
in Granite, Oklahoma. Mr. Berry, where were you born?
I was born in this county about 12 or 13 miles north and west of here.
And when's your birthday?
They called it Mangum. We was up on the Mangum route. They called it Mangum, Oklahoma, where the birth showed. Finally, was a little town there, Brinkman up there.
And when's your birthday?
19th of October. Born in 1900.
1900. Who was your father?
My father was Samuel J. Berry. And actually, I'm Samuel J. Berry Jr., but I was always nicknamed Jack, and everybody knows me that way.
And who was your mother?
Mother was Patsy J. Berry. Originally, she was originally my mother was a Briggs. Probably no relation to the Briggs that we knew of here, but never did try to figure out whether they come from the country. She did not. So they came from Kentucky here.
Okay, your mother's folks did?
My dad and mother both came from Kentucky here.
When did they come to Oklahoma?
Oh, they came on, I think 97 or 98.
Okay. Was this Oklahoma then, or was it still Texas at that time?
No, it was Oklahoma then.
Oklahoma.
I think it became Oklahoma territory. It wasn't a state. The state was divided, on two territories: Indian Territory and Oklahoma Territory.
Did they say why they came to Oklahoma?
It's what?
Did your folks say why they came to Oklahoma?
No, that of course they filed on the farm up there by Brinkman. That I don't suppose this moving around, hunting a place to live, I presume would be the reason. I never did hear any specific reason for them coming there.
How did they travel to Oklahoma?
That's what?
How did they come to Oklahoma?
Covered wagon.
Covered wagon?
Uh-huh.
They talked about the trip.
Well, they told very little about the trip. They came from Kentucky and went to Texas down, I believe Collin County, somewhere down in Texas for a year or two before they came up here. And never did hear them talk too much about their trip coming through. They only had one story ever told about running over his dog at Fort Smith, taking him out to bury him, and then told us, wrote back and told him he left his dog dead down in Fort Smith. They said he must not buried him good because he came home. He went from Fort Smith back to Kentucky. He always wondered how he got across the Mississippi River.
Did you know your grandparents?
No, my father's parents were dead before I was born, and I knew my mother's grandfather, my mother's father, and her stepmother. I met them back in 1907 or 8. They were out here.
Was he in the Civil War, your grandfather?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether he was or not.
Okay. What were their names, your grandparents?
My grandfather, mother's side, Briggs.
What was his first name?
What was what?
What was his first name?
My grandfather's name was George.
George Briggs.
Same as his Palmer's parents. George
But there's
W.
no relation.
No relation that we know of.
What was your grandmother's name?
My grandmother on my mother's side, let me see, my grandmother's name on dad's side was Dowell. My mother's side was, I can't even tell you the name.
Okay, that's
I was looking at it today. It was something like meese or something like that, but I really don't know what hurt.
What type of house did your father build on the farm?
Well, now I was born in a dugout. But we first built this sod dugout, and then he built what they used to call boxing strip, I believe. They run boxing plank up and down,
Okay.
and put a 1x4 strip over them.
Is that board and batten?
What?
Is that what I've heard called board and batten? Or boxing strip or something?
There's boxing strip, boxing plank, you know, and
Okay.
seemed like there was another name for it. And later sealed it with what's called beaded ceiling, a little thin board that had a little bead down through the middle of it, and that
Where did you get the lumber to build the house?
Quanah, Texas.
How
In fact,
far is that from here?
Quanah about 65, 70 miles, I guess. That I did similar to that. But nearly all the lumber in this country back in those days was hauled from Quanah. In fact, a lot of these houses here in this town are built from lumber called, the old houses are built from lumber from Quanah.
Do you remember the dugout?
The time I got big enough to remember, the dugout was just a low place out in the, in the ground out there that they'd show it to me and tell me about the dugout done been taken away and it's plowed in by the time I got it big enough to remember it, because they moved in they were building the house when I was born and moved right into it, and of course they tore that old dugout out and plowed it in as best they could.
How big was the house, the frame house?
The house was a two-room house, and then they built a long shed room across the back, and then it was had a story and a half house, and upstairs, a couple upstairs bedrooms above the 2 rooms, and they built a shed room on the side of it, which used to be kind of a pretty common way of building houses in this country.
Kind of a lean-to type?
Yeah, kind of a lean-to type house.
What kind of furnishings did your folks have in the house? What kind of furniture?
Well, back when I first remember, we had wooden bedsteads, kind of like they do now, and they had you had lots of change problems in this country. There was so much grass, and I think when they get in the house, they call them bed bugs in the house. Maybe they had these then. So much problem with that most everybody went to iron bedsteads, iron or steel with brass bed. Still see an old brass bed once in a while, but most of the old iron bedsteads, and of course the dressers and everything was wooden furniture. We didn't. I think our dining table and the benches we used were home built, but they were built out of bulk lumber. They still had several in the family at home, and not everybody used a bank for 9, 10.
How many kids in your family?
In my family,
Yeah.
there was 7 boys and 1 girl.
And y'all lived in that house?
No, 2 of the boys never did come up to this country. 2 of the boys settled and married and settled down in St. Joe, Texas. The other boys and my sister all lived in this house.
Okay.
Had one sister.
Tell me what chores you did on the farm as a small boy.
Well, I only stayed on the farm till I was about 11 or 12 years old, and of course I was big enough to help chop cotton, shock wheat, help get in kindling and bring in coal for big fires in the morning. Pretty good hand cleaning out the hen house, something like that.
Would you explain to me exactly the process of chopping cotton? How do you do it?
Well, a long time ago they'd plant cotton too thick, and they wanted to chop it and space it out about a foot apart. And your hoe was used about a 12-inch hoe, and just use your hoe for a gauge to chop the cotton out that is too thick. I don't think they thin cotton down anymore. They have a different kind of salt. But
How many plants would you leave? How many cotton plants?
leave one
Just one.
cotton plant in between them.
And how many pounds could you pick in one day?
I have picked as much as 300, but I never was what you call a real good cotton picker. But that picked 300 back then. They didn't pull it, back when I was a kid on the farm. But later they went to pulling bowls, and I never did pull very many bowls after they got pulling it. I was in a little town. They usually had a little job of some other kind. I pulled a few bowls, but I never was a good bowl puller.
Where was the cotton gin?
What?
Where was the cotton gin?
Gins?
Yeah.
Well, there was gins scattered around pretty well all over the country back in the early days. There was one out at Lake Creek and 2 or 3 here in Granite and in Mangum, and Brinkman had 2 or 3 cotton gins.
So where'd your father take his cotton?
To Mangum and Granite.
Okay. Do you know who ran the gins? Do you remember?
And well, see, there was a cotton gin at Willa too. No, I remember that Mark Pace run the gin at Willa, and I don't remember who run the gins at Granite or Mangum, either one.
Were they steam powered, those gins?
Yes,
Okay. What kind of fuel did they use?
coal.
Coal?
Mm.
Besides cotton farming, what else do you raise on the farm?
Well, wheat. My dad was. Most farmers back in those days believed in a varied crop. They thought if you'd been on one crop, you're out of luck, you know. And nearly everybody tried to put in some cotton, some wheat, and some corn, and some what's called row feed or something, maize and calf corn. And nearly everybody had a little pasture left. Didn't plow quite all their place. They had a little pasture to have some native grass.
Whenever you plow, do you plow with horses?
Yes.
How many acres did you plow in one day?
Probably 2 or 3. Just one single team, and with a double plow, then they'd use 4 head of horses. And I actually couldn't tell you just how many acres they did plow.
Now, what type of plow did you have?
Well, my daddy always used moldboard plow, and a lot of people used disc, what's called a disc plow, big old disc that turned the cotton over. My daddy used a flat bottom moldboard that turned the.
Did your father bust out sod when he first settled here?
Did what?
Did your father bust out sod
Yes.
when he first settled here? Did he talk about that, how you bust out sod?
Well, they had a what's called a sod plow. It had a cutter blade run out here on the front part that would cut down about that deep, about probably 4 inches deep or something like that. And it depended on how hard the soil was, how deep it went. It would cut this, and this plow, the sod plow, was made a little different from what your regular turning plow was, and it would turn this sod over, just turn it
Okay.
right bottom side up, and if you're doing a good job, it'd fit right in there, just lay right in, just lay them over as you went.
Now, what makes a sod plow different from a regular walking plow?
They a little flatter, and they I don't know, some way where the moldboard on it was. I guess it'd turn over without busting it up in clods and everything. The first plow they usually just turned it right over.
Okay. Where'd you start school?
I started school at a little country school, Plainview number 2. They call it up. Well, it's about 11 miles north of Mangum and about a half mile west.
One room schoolhouse?
One room. Well, about the first or second year I was in school, they built another room onto it, made it 2 rooms.
Do you remember your first day at school?
Yes, very well.
Tell me about it.
My first day at school, there was only 2 of us little boys in there, and we were about 7, and all the other boys was 12, 13 years old, and wasn't any little kids for us to play with, and they put us around to play with the girls. And and by the way, I talked not long ago to one of the girls I played with that first day at school. And see, it was but I remember very well our first day we were building houses out there, building us a little playhouse with sticks and dividing off rooms. Take a rock and put a stick for the room, had places for the doors and everything. And I was raised with my next brother was 10 years older than I, and I learned to defend yourself pretty well. You had to. So some kid come around, some boy about 12, 13, come around once in a while and kick one of her boards down there, and was getting a kick out of coming around. And I laid for him next time he come back around. I knocked him in the head with a broom handle. like the guy in pretty serious stuff first day in school. Didn't hurt him. But that's the only thing I knew to do was stop him from.
What was your teacher's name that first year?
My first teacher's name was Wyatt.
A man or woman?
Woman.
Woman.
There was none of the whites in this country, and then next teacher that went to was Warwick.
And the first year, was it all the grades in that one room?
Yes.
Could you explain how that one teacher handled all 8 grades?
Well, these should have reading, and then they would the older ones sometimes read first. Sometimes you'd have the young ones to read from their readers first, and they'd read a few minutes, and then you'd go to the board and work your arithmetic problems, and the older ones, and as they gradually went on up with the classes, and of course, several of the grades would have the same arithmetic, and I should maybe probably went up, it seemed like about 7th in the first year or two I went to school, about as high grades as we had. But there wasn't as many classes as you might think, because some of them could take the same arithmetic, some of the classes, and maybe they could take a little further on in there, but I don't know, it seemed like the young ones learned to read a lot from the older ones reading, which I've often wondered if we shouldn't have the groups together with reading nowadays, so I think kids learn to read by listening to the older ones more so than to do by themselves. I know I used to get my book and follow them when I did borrow somebody's 2nd grade reader when I was in the 1st. Because I started primer, we used to have a primer, and then the 1st grade. And
what games did you play in school?
tag, and they played running games where you run back and forth to catch, and they had tag, and they'd play Andy over, throwing the ball over the schoolhouse, one bunch on one side, one the other, and did lots of running, did lots of races. Kids would get out and match their own races and run, and finally even at this country school, they bought us some baseball gloves and baseballs, and come up with baseballs, and get to watch the bigger ones play baseball. Didn't get to play very much at the ball, but they mostly running games like tag and black men, first thing, and they're the old similar. But
how far did you go through school?
How far did I go?
Yeah.
Well, I finished high school after. Let's see, but there about I don't know, probably 4th, 5th, 6th grade, something, and then they consolidated the schools at Brinkman, and two districts consolidated, and then they organized on up into high school, and I finished high school there at Brinkman.
What year?
1917.
1917. What about World War I?
I was in it a little young, but I was in it a while. I spent about 6 months.
Were you drafted, or did you enlist?
No, I was too young to draft. In fact, I was too young to even get in, but
how'd you get in?
I was born at Missouri. I'd finished high school, went to one of Missouri working in the newsstand up there, and we went down to we all decided to enlist. The boys that I was working with, another boy that I was working with, and a couple of boys were running around with some. They were up 18 and passed, and I wasn't. So they needed parents' permission to get in under 21 back then, and I believe. And anyway, they fill up my paper and send them home for the paper for my folks to sign, and they call this what do they call the enlisted man that took you in there before you enlisted?
The recruiter?
Yeah, recruiter. Yeah. They called this recruiter and told him to send everybody ahead. And they didn't want to split us, so he just picked up my paper and marked me as 21 years old.
Why did you go to Missouri?
I made application to Fred Harvey News Company. They operated the stations in the depots and the lunchrooms up and down the railroad and the news butchers on the train, on the Santa Fe and Frisco lines. I made application to them at Oklahoma City, and they sent me to Monette, Missouri. I worked at this in Oklahoma City, and they sent me to Monette, Missouri.
Okay, now what was your duties with the?
We had a newsstand there in the depot. What's called newsstand, fruit and candy and stuff, and check suitcases. Had checks down there that people could check their suitcases while they were going for.
And you were, you say Monette?
Monette.
Okay, how far is that from Joplin?
It's only a few miles. It's not, right now I can't tell you, but probably 30 miles.
And how long were you there before you enlisted?
I was there about 6 months.
Where did you go to basic?
I went up at Leavenworth, I guess, up there, Fort Leavenworth, at
That in Kansas?
Missouri, up near St. Louis, and I stayed there a short time. They sent me to Fort Brancos, Florida.
Is that Fort Leonard?
No, it's at Jefferson.
Oh, Jefferson Barracks?
Jefferson Barracks,
Okay.
Barracks.
Okay. Tell me about basic. What happened?
In basic?
Yeah.
Well, I went pretty fast through basic, but I didn't have much of it. We stayed around Monette a few days, and at Jefferson Barracks for a few days, and sent us down to Florida, and they put us into a company that was practically ready to go. So we just drilled pretty fast and got ready to go with this company. And they didn't have, just get the main basic drills is about all we got, and we was going to learn them as we went across the seas and everything. And I didn't go across the sea because it was, that was when the Spanish flu hit the United States first time. And we were camped at Camp Merritt, New Jersey, where they sent us for embarkation, and then we started out on this boat, and they come through for medical check, and it took about 13, 14 of us off and put us back to the local hospital out there with flu. Base hospitals and New York hospital done full, since out in the country to a hospital out there.
Let me back up, and at Jefferson Barracks, what did the barracks look like that you stayed in? Could you describe the barracks?
Well, they were pretty nice wooden buildings, that two-story buildings, and they weren't divided in rooms or anything. Your bunks were all just lying alongside
An open
wall.
bay
Yeah,
area?
open bay area, and they at Jefferson Barracks now they fed everybody in one big kitchen, and the kitchen was quite an operation up there. But back at the other camps, why each company had its own dining room. But up there they fed the whole camp, about 3,500 people in one big hall. Up there had 4 or 5 lines that come in.
How many men were in basic with you at Jefferson Barracks?
You mean in my company?
Yeah.
About 200.
About 200.
Mm-hmm.
Could you? What type of drills did you? Just tell me about your average day in basic. You know, from time reveille until retreat. What'd you do?
Well, you stood, you first stood reveille, and then went to eat, and then they called you out for probably a little drill duty for a while. And well, usually early they'd put you through a bunch of calisthenics. You'd take calisthenics for quite a while, and then maybe go out and teach you to march, and later teach you drill formation and stuff like that. After you, first thing, just plain old marching and double column or something. And they didn't work you too hard. They didn't know you. I knew you couldn't take all of it for a while. It seemed like it a little hard on guys that are short like me. They put the tall boys in front. Of course, they try to limit them down to 28-inch step, but it's hard for them to stay down to 28. 28 is a pretty good step for a little fella.
What about bayonet drill?
I never had much bayonet drill. Very little.
Did they train you with the gas mask?
Did I?
Did they train you with the gas mask?
Very little. I've had a little training with gas mask. Take a gas mask and go through a chamber with it. About all.
Tell me about going on a troop train from Jefferson Barracks to Florida. What was the train trip like?
Well, it's just a regular troop train, and they would make arrangements at some place down the line to get off and eat. And I believe, I know we stopped in Atlanta and went to the YMCA there, and they fed us at the YMCA, and we went swimming there, and so we have a bath. Then, but the next day, then going on down to Florida.
Did you sleep on the train?
Yeah, as best you could, and the troop train was just average passenger cars.
So there's no beds in the train of any
No, it
kind?
wasn't the beds. They didn't send in on
You just had to
time.
make do.
Yeah,
And you went to Fort Marion?
went by
Fort Marion in Florida?
Camp Barrancas,
Camp
Florida.
Barrancas, okay. Where is that? What part of Florida?
It's at Fort Barrancas. It's up here in the Panhandle, up close to
What, around Tallahassee or?
around Tallahassee, but it's not at that. Wasn't that? It's just side of Tallahassee a little ways in there.
Pensacola?
Pensacola,
Pensacola, okay.
That's where we went.
And what'd you do there in Florida?
Well, we did hiked and drilled there in the sand. About all that sand is pretty deep out around there. We was stationed right near an old Spanish. Had been no Spanish fort there, and we got our rifles was issued to us there, and we had some big guns out on the island there that we got to fool with a little bit, very little. I never didn't get around to the big guns very much, and we'd have to go out on the island to our big guns. Kind of learned the workings of it. I never did get to have fire one. Just get to stand around and watch it. But that.
Is that when the flu first hit, when you were in Florida?
No, I would got to New York when flu first hit.
How bad was that flu?
That flu was, it was a terrible thing. That came in there in less than a week. Every hospital in New York City and all the base hospitals out around there and the camps was full. And this group that I was with, they took us out to an old county relief hospital that wasn't being used right at that particular time. And out near Hackensack, New Jersey. And they took us to this hospital, and we went up in there the next morning, and out of the 13 that we went in that night, there was 3 of them dead next morning. It was that fast, and in less than 10 days, practically all the doctors were sick, and the nurses and everybody was down. The doctors were having a hard time keeping a well doctor up in that part of the country.
How do they treat the flu? What
They
medicine?
didn't have the least idea what to do. They just gave you a little bit of laxative and kind of like you'd treat a cold or something. They didn't know what to do. They were taking, right in there at that particular time, they were really taking every kind of a test, swabbing in their throats and everything, trying to find what the bug was. They didn't know, and of course I guess they never did find for sure.
Did you have the flu?
Yes.
How long were you down with it?
I was down for a little over a week. I was out for 2 days, completely out.
Any idea how many men up there in New York died from the flu that were in the Army?
No, I really don't know. But there was, I don't think the Army lost as many as it did, its percentage probably is what they did down in the city up there, but there was thousands of them that died there. I don't know how many that died during the time.
Did you go overseas then, during the war?
No, I never did go overseas. We loaded the time I got into casual battalion, the Mecca battalion, and got ready to ship out. The armistice was signed, and so
What did you do at Armistice Day?
Armistice Day, we were hiking Armistice Day and going down a boat, to load on a boat down to Hoboken. We had out this camp. We had to hike about 7 or 8 miles over across the Palisade and get on a ferry down the Hudson River down to Hoboken where the boat was. And the big part of the excitement is overtime. We got down there the night of the particular day. Up there, the big rush, the one that where there was much dangerous was that there was a false alarm come out one day. You know, about a week ahead of what the armistice was actually signed, and there was more people killed in New York City celebrating that day than there was on Armistice Day.
So there were people killed celebrating?
Yeah.
How were they killed? What happened?
Oh, they'd fall out of buildings for something. Again.
Were you up there celebrating?
No, I was out at camp.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't pay too much attention out at camp. They probably didn't do as much as they
When did you
did
get
up
your
there.
discharge? Oh, excuse me.
What?
When did you get your discharge?
I was discharged in January of 18,
18 or
19, I guess.
Yeah.
19.
The armistice was
18,
signed
yeah.
November 1918.
18, yeah, on 1919.
Okay. So what did you do from the armistice until January?
Well, I was shipped. They sent us down to Camp Lee, Virginia, and thought they could discharge us from there, and we fixed up all our papers, and the ones that were in that group that were further west, we come on over to Camp Taylor, Kentucky. And at Camp Taylor, Kentucky, we had a little problem getting released. So,
What kind of problems did you have?
yeah, they wanted to hold us through Christmas for let guys off the base there. Wanted us, since we'd come in there, new ones in there, they kind of wanted to, everybody else take Christmas, but pretty well did. We were supposed to come out, we were supposed to have been out Christmas Day because we had a handy place to get started coming out, and we come out pretty fast, and we had a little problem getting, in fact we had to go to the personnel department and get them to go down, straighten us up and get us lined up and get out, because we fixed our papers up. I helped do them, and at Camp Lee, I have to do the papers over there that we brought over to Kentucky. All they need to do is just sign and pay us. But it took us about 2 or 3 weeks to get out of Camp Taylor.
After you discharged, what'd you do?
I came on home after the discharge. They gave me a ticket to Camp Merritt, or to Monette, Missouri, where I went. And of course I wanted to come home. I went back to Monette, and I stayed there a couple of days, come on home, and I called the company back I'd been working for, and they told me the job was open, and gave me a choice of 2 or 3 places to go. I could have my old job back at Monette, but they asked me if I wouldn't go to Enid, the place up there that needs some help at Enid for a short time. And I went from there to Enid.
So you worked for the same company at
The
Enid?
same company at Enid a while, and then went back to Monette for a little while, and
You still run the newsstands and the train depot?
yeah.
What was the name of the company you worked for?
Fred Harvey News Company.
Okay, now is that the same one that had the Harvey House?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, the old slice of thin.
Did you know Mr. Harvey? Did you ever meet him?
No, I knew his son-in-law, but I don't remember his name. But he was dead at that particular time. In fact, Mr. Harvey, I always heard that he was buried twice. Well, they had went to go to the funeral once and wasn't dead. But I don't know if that was true or not. They always told us that he was about to bury him, and he come back to, he wasn't dead.
How long did you stay in Monette then?
When I went back, I only stayed a few days. I come home and went to work in the garage at home, and come back to Brinkman up here.
How big was the town of Brinkman?
Well, Brinkman at one time was up around 1,000 people, something like that. Had several business houses and the one thing.
What were the main businesses in Brinkman at that time? Who were they?
Who were they?
Yeah, the businessmen, and what kind of business did they have?
Well, during the time Austin Dry Goods had a store here. They put a store in up there, and there was a doctor from London, came from there over there, and they had about 3 doctors there for a while, and that had 2 lumber yards, bank. West Holland was the banker there, and W.D. Hall had a general merchandise, and he handled hardware and groceries and dry goods. Had 3 buildings together there that he finally wound up with. A Sharon named Massad had a store there for a while. Thomas had a store there.
Who was the banker in town?
Who was my
Who was the banker in town?
West Holland?
What's all? What did the main street of Brinkman look like?
Well, just a wide street running east and west, and at first it was all wooden buildings. Finally, there was 2 or 3 brick buildings put in there before the town finally went completely gone.
Where did the bricks come from? Where were the bricks made?
I think they come from Mangum brick plant over there.
Okay, there was a brick factory in Mangum then.
Back, yeah.
Yeah.
Back there's been a brick plant there a long time. In fact, there was a brick plant in Granite one time.
When's the first time you came to Granite?
Just to come here,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I about probably 1910. Come back in there somewhere.
What did the town look like at that time?
A whole lot like it does now. There's a lot more wooden buildings up and down the street than there was now. But granted, it wasn't near as big when I came here as it had been at one time. There'd been a lot more businesses up down through here back in before Prohibition and things. And then
Did you know George Briggs?
yes.
What kind of man is he?
Oh, he was a wonderful kind of a gentleman. Very fine fellow. He was a gentleman to be proud of. Good for the community and everything.
What kind of personality did he have? What kind of man was he?
Well, as I remember him, he was really a mild-mannered type of man. And he was a fairly large fella, and my stature, and he was he had lots of fun, and he enjoyed going fishing with people or something and joking. But he was, I guess, number one kind of a gentleman. He was a good church
Did he ever
man.
tell you any stories about the cattle drives?
No, I never did talk to him about the cattle drive.
And how big was his ranch? Do you know? Any idea?
No, I don't. I don't know. They had some land out on the river that he had and sold, and then he owned part of the town site here, you know, when it was built. And it was all, it had been dissolved a long time before I came here. I moved here in 1924. But they hadn't been he had some, I know he had some cattle in out north town, but I never was out around it much. But
Were there many grass fires around here in the early days?
not too many. I don't remember, but very few grass fires back when I was kidding. They were usually pretty easy to control. And a bunch, they'd come from everywhere with sacks and spades to put them out. But
What would start the grass fires?
I don't know, lightning and something like that was pretty bad about starting grass fires. Sometimes trash fire get out of hand back in the early days, but by the time, of course, by the time I was big enough, there wasn't too many great big pastures. I mean, so much of the land was broken out and was in spots where they wasn't wide open like it was earlier. But I never did hear talk of very many grass fires.
1920s. I guess, were there many of the young girls they call flappers in this area?
Not many, few.
What is a flapper? What?
Oh, they wore the dresses a little shorter than a lot of people approved of. That I'm more nonchalant about things. I guess they weren't really wild or anything. They were nice girls, but they would back then they wore pretty long dresses. They didn't say much of a girl.
When did you get your first car?
My first car?
Yeah.
I guess in 1918 or something.
And when did you see your first car?
I saw my first car about 1907 or 8.
What did you think of that?
Well, I thought it was a wonderful thing. A little high-wheel automobile, looked more like just an old buggy with a motor in it or something. Where we lived out on the farm was a pretty steep hill, and they didn't have a lot of gears like they do nowadays, and that the reverse was a lot lower gear than the hill there at our house. The little cars used to come up there, and they'd have to have to back uphill. They couldn't pull it going uphill.
Who had that car?
Oh, about that. I don't remember who had the first ones I ever saw. They had Dr. Buckmaster from Mangum. I remember was one doctor that could come out through there once in a while in the car. His wasn't a real tall wheel. His was a medium-sized wheel. And some of them were little gasoline motors that pop, 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 and some of them were steamers. The steamers were steamers early. My first car that I rode in, I drove it from standstill. Known to Dr. Border, man.
What kind of car was that?
I believe it, I'm not sure if it was a Stanley or not. It was a steamer of some type. Because I know we didn't adjust it right and we lost steam and had to stop coming back and wait a little bit to get steam back up in the car. That top of high wheel and got stuck in the sand. And those little tires were just solid rubber tires on it. And they were a little bigger than buggy tires, the one that I rode in. And of course he was helping me drive it, but he put me over on the driver's side. Dr. Border was quite a friend of mine when he used to come up through our country to see patients. Something in our house, that always headquarters stay.
And he came from Mango?
He came from Mangum. He'd come up through Brinkman and go up to Willen, up through there, and once in a while make a round up there.
And what was his name again?
Border, Dr. Border. There were several doctors in the country then, Dr. Border and Diorman, Dr. Moss at Willen, and then there was Dr. Nunnery here, which his son was later a doctor here for years and years. But this Dr. Border was one of the first surgeons in the country, but the first hospital at Mangum, the Border Hospital, the building still stands. Well, it's not the first hospital either, but he was upstairs over at drugstore. That's the first hospital, and he built this hospital. It's a museum over there now.
Did you know the Busby family in Mangum?
Who?
The Busby family?
I knew of them. Right now, I don't remember too much about them right now. I did know them back in the early days.
When did you or your father get your first tractor?
Tractor, we never had a tractor. We left it for him about 1912, 13. Now, we had a thrashing machine with a steam engine. We tried plowing with it a little bit, but it was too big.